So I've listened to a couple of your episodes. I think you don't know what you're in for with this one, buddy. I'm going to bring the collective intelligence of your audience down.
I don't know about that.
Let's
I think
freaking go.
And once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as I seek out and interview leaders and practitioners who are innovating and building great scaled CS programs. My goal is to share what I've learned and to bring you along with me for the ride so that you get the insights that you need to build and evolve your own digital CS program. If you'd like more info, want to get in touch or sign up for the latest updates, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. And if you have a question or commentary to be used in an upcoming episode, call us and leave a message at 512-222-7381. For now, let's get started. Greetings, happy Tuesday, and welcome to episode 22 of the Digital CS Podcast. I have an awesome conversation to share with you today with none other than Dillon Young, host of the Lifetime Value podcast. If you haven't checked out his show, please go do it because he and I have a very similar style, very conversational, but he also is just very good at asking really pointed and good questions and just leading down good conversational paths. So definitely go check out his show. I really enjoyed our conversation today because it's always fun talking to fellow podcasters. But we go into in depth around the evolution of digital CS. We do to talk about generative AI a little bit and our shared kind of mistrust with some of it. We talk a lot about data cleanliness and what it means to having efficient CSMs on the back end of clean data, and get into all myriad of side topics, including how important it is to, take mental breaks and disconnect for a bit, and also take control of what information comes in on a daily basis. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's one of my absolute favorites, and I hope that you too will enjoy this conversation with Dillon Young because I sure did. We'll see you later. Nice green cup. Are you trying to like are you lost at sea? Do you need a beacon?
So here's the thing. I also have a bright orange phone case. Right. And it's why I agreed to be on your podcast because you're speaking to me with your logo color.
Yeah, it is a little bit annoying.
I love it. It is annoying, but that's the point.
That's the point. What's weird is I started with like a Southwest color scheme. Like I was going for like Southwest colors, like the oranges and greens, and then it just morphed into this, hey, look, here's me.
When you say Southwest, do you mean Santa Fe, New Mexico? Is that
totally? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a time and a place for that, but if you're not weird enough, it doesn't work. So your shit is, it's just in your face.
Yeah.
And let's make an entire episode out of this.
I agree.
The business of podcasting.
The business of CS podcasting. Well, hi, Dillon. Should we start?
Didn't we already? I'm almost done. I got a meeting.
Okay. Cool. We'll see you later.
I'm excited to be here. So just introduce me properly next time.
Whatever. I mean, look, for those that aren't in the know, Dillon Young is another fabulous CS podcaster, host of the Lifetime Value podcast, which if you haven't checked it out or, subscribed or liked or downloaded or whatever it is, you should do that now because it is very entertaining and informative. And, not only are you the host of that show, you're a pretty awesome CS leader as well. So I wanted to jump at the chance at having you on, and maybe we'll talk about CS for a little bit, but maybe not.
We could get there. Well, thank you for having me, Alex. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to give a brief origin story? Like, where did Dillon Young come from?
Yeah. So you and I have this in common. It's interesting because you
Yeah.
don't hear this story often. I went to school for music, for audio recording. Um, and when I left school, I just found a bevy of audio recording opportunities. That's sarcasm, folks. They're, they're few and far between. And
You
back when I
mean, and by
graduated,
that you mean you got to make coffee for shitty artists for a while.
so here's the interesting thing. I lucked into actually a really cool gig for the very short amount of time that I was in the music industry. Working, I was originally, yes, the receptionist for a concert booking agency, but it was the concert booking agency that booked Billy Joel and Rod Stewart and Metallica and Def
Okay,
Leppard. Like, pretty cool. And after a year, I was so good at answering the phone, they made me the assistant to the vice president. So this was the dude that booked all of Metallica's North American tours, all of Def
great.
Leppard's global tours. Uh,
That's amazing.
he also was the agent for both Bret Michaels and whatever was he was that Motley Crue? No, what was he in? Was it Motley Crue? No,
Poison.
Poison.
No, Bret Michaels is Bret Michaels Poison?
I don't know, but
Gosh,
it didn't matter
all of
because
my contemporaries are rolling over in their grave
what
right
was
now.
popular then was that dating show that he was on, the Bret
Oh
Michaels
yeah,
dating
what was
show.
that?
Remember that?
I do
So
remember that. That
when
was
he called, it was like DEFCON 5 because like he was the hottest thing on the market at the time for old 50 something white dudes.
yeah.
I did so bad at that job that they after a year they were like, "Hey, you can go back to being the receptionist, or we got to fire you."
Which one?
By
would
the
you
way,
like?
I was living in Manhattan making
Yeah.
$25,000 a year, so it was just untenable. And I literally
Yeah.
could make more money if I took my part-time job I was doing on the weekends, uh, working at a bakery, and if I just did that full time, I could make more money.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
pathetic it was. So, look, long story short, shortly after that, I found a sales job at a startup in New York City, and then I did operations for them, and then I ended up in customer success operations, and like I bounced around geographically, but I was always in those technology companies, customer facing roles, sales, training, support, customer success, operate, like all of it. It was not until 2021 I was interviewing for a job, and the chief customer officer was Ruben Rabago, if you know the name.
Sure.
I somehow found out that he wrote the book that he wrote, and I read it and was like, what the fuck? I've been doing customer success this whole time, but you've been calling me an account manager or a like customer enablement
Right.
engineer. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I've been doing customer success this whole time. And that like really, I loved what I did, but I didn't realize it was all in the same category. And that really crystallized it for me. And so since then, I've been targeting very specifically customer success roles. And today, as we talk, I am the director and head of customer success for a mortgage fintech company called Maxwell, where I run the customer success management team.
Yep. And you host a podcast
From time to time. So you and I
from
have
time to
talked
time.
about this
So
quite a bit.
we have actually. It's been good to commiserate, I suppose, on the life of a podcast host. But I'm curious. So let's rewind the clock a little, because so like you, it's so funny. You know, I got a degree in audio engineering.
Yeah.
We both kind of did stuff in the industry, and we both kind of like were like, okay, let's actually earn a living.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not hang out with sketchy people
Degenerates.
all the time,
Yeah.
and put on the big boy pants. But I found, I wouldn't say I regret going to school and getting a bachelor's of arts in audio engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I regret it a little bit, but I think the artistic aspect of it, and also the technical aspect of the degree itself, has paid off in spades. I think, into even today. Do you find the same thing? Like, do you draw upon that experience as a, I
So
guess,
you went to a
an
different
art
school than me. I
student?
think yours.
Yeah,
Which school did you go to?
I went to Berkeley College of Music.
Okay. Well, God bless you. You're legitimate. I
I
went
don't know
to
about
a
that.
for-profit vocational, like accelerated program called Full Sail. And nowadays, like those guys get a really bad rap. Some of them have gone bankrupt, and a lot of them are a part of the debt student loan debt relief programs because they were like predatory.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of hope that Full Sail ends up there because I think they were. But I'll tell you what it taught me. It
Well, if
taught
you saw
me.
the skyscraper that Berkeley built in downtown Boston on the backs of tuition payments, I'm I don't
Well,
think it's too far off. But go ahead.
what it taught me is exactly what I'm going to hand down to my son, which is, hey, you want to make any sort of decision that's going to cost you X amount of dollars, like 5 figures, 6 figures in the long run, more once you consider interest and things like that. You better have a damn good idea of what the implications are. What sort of skills is that going to provide to you that you can use into the future? What's the, we talk a lot in SaaS about like the total addressable market. Like, what's the market for audio engineers?
Right.
Wish I would have thought about that one. It also taught me the value of hard work, of putting your head down and really just going after it. The school I went to, I got an associate's degree in 10 months and then a bachelor's in another 12. So under 2
Wow.
years, and I came out with 2 degrees. And I thought I was getting like this huge jump on my peers, but they got real educations. You can do anything you put your mind to. Everybody's learning style is different. It taught me all those things. Could I have gotten a degree in a field with more opportunities? Absolutely. But I find that it is not holding me back now. I can't say the same for everybody. I definitely would be further along if I had a different degree. But regrets are for losers, Alex.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, today, the conversation has shifted since when we were in school, like 80 years ago, to where it's like, do we even need this stuff? Like, there's
well, the University of YouTube
has come a long way.
is
Yeah,
free.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hey, you think I learned a podcast?
Hey, YouTube. It's great. Didn't have to read or nothing.
Nope.
Nope. So speaking of the podcast, what was kind of your impetus in getting started with that? I read, I did stalk you on LinkedIn a little bit.
Good.
And
Somebody is.
One of your posts around launch time was, that it was essentially your love letter to CS, which I love that, because it's kind of why we do those things, right? And we want to provide value, but we want to do it in a way that actually provides value. So anyway, I won't put words in your mouth, but
yeah, it's funny because what this sentiment changed from when I started, which was probably October of 2022. I started really thinking about it, started recording in November, started publishing in January, and then stopped in May. And we're about to start back up. It was what got me excited to get out of bed in the morning, was not the podcast itself. It's a vehicle for the opportunity to talk to people you might not have another reason to. Like, great example, Jan Young. Jan was the very first guest we published an episode for. that lady is smart and
Heck yeah.
has a lot to bring to the table when it comes to customer success. Another super easy example, and I'm not blowing smoke, is like the opportunity to meet you. Like we have a lot in common. We have a similar sense of humor, and we both happen to be in customer
Whatever.
success. Would I have been able to meet you otherwise? Like to me, that's probably the most valuable part of it. I also mentioned this at the beginning, the ability to contribute meaningfully to the community. And that has since more recently been reinforced for me. I don't know that I totally deserve it, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're like up there in terms of the podcasters that I listen to."
Yeah.
So that validates it a bit for me. But for that
Well, I
same
mean,
reason is why I've stopped for a little bit here,
yeah.
Alex, because I found it is one of my goals originally was to not be echo chambery, and I think we ended up there in the end. And
Mm.
so I have this inner challenge of how do we solve for that? How do we continue to expand our perspectives and get opinions and thoughts from people other than those that we look like, think like, sound like?
Is but it's not you that's echo chambery. I think it's the guests that end up being, echo chambery. And I have to say, like, not to, I'm going to equally blow smoke up your ass, but in a very meaningful way, hopefully, which is to say that, there are a lot of podcasts out there, but a lot of them are hard to listen to. They're just, and your interview style is very natural, and it's like, it's things that I aspired to, in starting this one as well, which is to say, I just want a bird's eye view into somebody's conversation, maybe
Mm-hmm.
laugh a little bit, take some
Mm-hmm.
things away, and feel like I, not necessarily feel like I sat through a lecture or some kind of contrived thing, but just, I got back from my run and I was talking to people the whole time. And that's very much the feeling that I get out of listening to your show.
And here's the thing, like I no longer commute to work, which thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did, I commuted. I think my average commute for like over a decade was over an hour each way.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Yeah.
so
Sure.
when podcasts really got popular, I started listening to a lot of them, and it was bizarre how excited I would be if 2 weeks, a month, 6 months later, I remembered something I had heard from a podcast and could apply it in some way, whether it was like an aphorism or it was a turn of phrase. If I could apply that much later, that means that it sunk in. It
Mm.
mattered to me, and increasingly, I found that was no longer happening. And so that is what I aspire to: is how do we deliver information that people actually absorb and can use later on, and how do we do that as often as possible? For me, that's conversation. It's just learning. It can't be, it's why I don't listen to audiobooks really, because I don't. It puts me in a trance state. I don't feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
engaging with it at all.
Yeah. Are you more of a visual learner? Like, do you need to look at stuff?
For sure. Or I have to do
Yeah.
it. I'm more of a kinetic learner, probably first and
Kinetic.
foremost.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Well, look, I mean, this is what we call the digital customer success podcast. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you at least some questions related to digital CS
Sure.
and your kind of take on it. And one thing I do ask everybody is kind of, what's your 10 to 30-second elevator pitch of digital CS, which I'm compiling with all my guests. So what would you say? Like if somebody asked you, hey, what is digital CS? What would your answer be?
10 to 30 seconds. You're not going to get that, by the way. It is. So
I,
I would take away. So I'll be upfront, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I take
no.
issue with the term digital
Mm-hmm.
CS.
Great.
And tech touch, I think, is also kind of. I think it just so happens that here's the goal of customer success today: is how do you make customers successful as efficiently as possible. Now, efficiency cuts both ways. It's both in your customers' allocation of resources as well as your company's allocation of resources. So now, when it comes to digital, that's just the vehicle through which it's most effective right now,
Sure. Yeah.
is because digital has a very low cost to do repeatable activities.
Yeah.
So when I think about digital customer success, I really just think about what are the tools or processes that we can do repeatably and at very low cost that enable our customer success people to make our customers successful.
Yep.
And then I've talked about this a lot in the podcast. It then frees up your customer success professionals to do what they do best, which is my money is on their ability to think strategically, build relationships with those folks, and then make money where those two intersect.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, digital CS as it's defined has come a long way in the last 2 years. Even like, people used to talk about it like it was a segment, and a lot of people still talk about it like it's a segment. And now it's really the channel through which you do some of those things. And also, one thing that you mentioned just now that is becoming much more and more part of the talk track is how digital CS not only makes your customers more effective and helps drive your customers' goals and whatnot, but helps makes your CSMs more effective because there's just that much less that they have to do on a day basis. At least, hopefully it doesn't make them do more, which I've seen happen.
More is relative too. Like, so I used to think being the busiest person was being the best, right? That made you the best employee. When in actuality, like, that doesn't matter. Like, we don't live in the clock punching days anymore. I mean, if you can derive the same outcomes as all of your peers, and you can do it in 2 hours instead of 40 hours, or in hustle culture it was 60 or 80 hours. If you can do that, then good on you. Now, what will eventually happen is there will be downward pressure, and our senior leadership overlords will recognize that they can give us more. Our books of business can be larger because it turns out that we're managing them that much more efficiently. I think that's just a natural cycle that's going to occur forever. It happened in the industrial age. It's going to happen in this digital age, or whatever comes after that. But I think you can only analyze these sorts of issues within a certain time frame. And I think you're right. We're kind of like transitioning right now from one time frame to another, which was when digital CS, we only understood the demand for efficiency in the context of customers that were not valuable enough to command one-on-one time or attention.
Yeah.
Right. But now I think we're recognizing that, okay, well, we could use those same tools and we could do things that every customer needs, whether they're a $10 million customer or they're a $1,500 customer. I'm talking ARR. They still need to get talked to in ways like that don't require a one-on-one touch, that don't require any level of institutional knowledge of that relationship. Okay, well, let's use those tools. And to me, that's where you're seeing quote unquote digital CS go to.
Yep.
That's where I'll leave it.
I love it. It's about meeting them where they are, meeting your customers where they are, and in with a vehicle that hopefully isn't so contrived that it just confuses them even more. Because I see that a lot, right? There's a lot of folks who go to implement some digital motions, and they do it in a way that just ends up causing confusion in the whole thing. But that's neither here nor there. I think one of the episodes on your podcast that I enjoyed listening to was your conversation with Mickey Powell,
Mm.
The resident CS expert on generative AI these days. And one of the things I took away from that conversation is it was a very, I don't know really the adjective to describe it, but you were extremely hesitant when it came to generative AI, and you were just, there was obvious detest in your voice
Uh-huh.
when it came, when it came time to talk about it. Has that changed for you at all? Like, are you now a ChatGPT user because of that conversation?
No.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm also not, and I apologize to Mickey and to Josh. I don't know Josh. I've only met Mickey a handful of times. He and I
Yeah.
talk about the where the Golden State Warriors are headed in this upcoming season. That's mostly what Mickey and I talk about. And I predicted that Jordan Poole trade, by the way. Thank you, Mickey. I was apologizing to Mickey and Josh because I've now tried to use Update AI twice
Mhm.
and have stopped using it within 2 or 3 phone calls each time, because I don't know if I just talk funny, like if the structure of my sentences is like hard to understand or what, but it never ever delivers valuable insights on my conversations. Now,
Hmm.
that is not a knock on Update AI. That is a knock on where we stand today with AI's ability to analyze transcripts and pull out valuable information from it. Here's what
Yeah.
I mean. I have a conversation that's 30 minutes long. First 5 to 10 minutes is us shooting the shit, right? Same as you and I did
Absolutely.
when we first jumped on here.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get into the meat of it. Maybe that's 10 or 15 minutes. Usually I got to provide a little bit of context, and then eventually I'll get to the action item for whoever my counterpart is on that call. Whether it's a customer or whether it's an internal party, it's typically the exact same structure no matter what. Then, the very end of the call, 5 minutes-ish, I literally, almost every single time I say, all right, I've got some homework to do, and it's X, Y, and Z. And what I understood from this conversation is you're going to go back and do A, B, and C. And I apply timelines to both of those. Now, look, Alex, I think that's pretty fucking easy for a robot to figure out, right? That last part, those things I said. And yet,
This is what I'm going to do.
invariably, I end up with action items about how much I hate Taylor Swift. I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I fucking hate Taylor Swift. I think she's a fraud. I think she's pulled the wool over everybody's eyes for this insane cash grab. And one time, Update AI was like, I guess maybe I said it sarcastically or something, but Update AI was like, you need to buy tickets to the Taylor Swift concert coming to the New York City metropolitan area. What the
Because it was
fuck?
part of the conversation at some point or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And like only
Yeah.
got 2 out of 3 of the action items that I actually listed at the end of the call or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, and to your point, that I don't think that is a. So here's my take on this, right? Um, I to your point, it's not an Update AI thing. It's
Mm-mm.
not any of these other platforms that are doing things with generative AI. It is I think it's a byproduct of this V1 world where we live in, where these products are trying to adopt generative AI technologies in a way that helps us, do tasks. Another example would be I subscribe to this podcasting tool that is supposed to, from your transcripts,
Mm.
pump out, LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
blurbs, posts, a corresponding article. What was it?
Mm-hmm.
Title suggestions and all those kinds of things. And I mean, I would say out of all of the massive amounts of content that it spits out, I'd say 5% is maybe usable with some tweaking. But I think the reason for that is because what you're not getting with those tools is like the follow up that is required in prompting generative AI to achieve the results that you want, right? I mean, these tools are providing basically a predefined prompt with your inputs into it, but there's no like second level of, okay, now make it look like this, or now make it like this to be a little bit more usable. I think that's probably part of the problem, but I find
Here's
that with most tools that are doing that.
here's my argument. That 95% that you have deemed unusable, you got to sift through that to even find the 5%.
Yeah, I'd rather just write the summary myself.
Right. If you did a time study to then think about, like, okay, well, how long would it take me to just come up with the 5% myself versus how long does it take me to sift through all the garbage that this bot made for me and pick out the nuggets that I still then have to polish? For me, I do totally believe, and Mickey brought me around to this, of like the speaking the language of generative AI prompts is probably where there's value right now. And in the same way, if you understood how to code 20 years ago, you're in a fucking sweet spot right now. Or you probably were like 10 years ago, right? Because that's going to change really soon with things like AI. It's becoming commoditized. I do believe in that. But I also think that we live in customer success professionals. The world I live in with customer success is you are a strategic relationship building individual. We do not pump out widgets. With that in mind, it is so bespoke and based on your personality and the way you think and your time management and all that stuff that, like, I still just don't think that AI has a place in it.
Yet or at all?
Well, look, I mean, it's always yet, right? Like, the machines will eventually take over. It's a matter of where that is on the horizon. And I don't think it's
when
in
and how.
2 years, right? I think it's in 10, 15.
So GenAI isn't where your heart is right now. That makes sense. There's that green cup again. It's like a beacon. Where are you focused digitally? Like what are you implementing? What are you looking at from a kind of a quote unquote digital motion that you've implemented for your customers, for internal folks? Like where are you focused at?
For me, it's all about data collation. So where we have any self-respecting software company has a disjointed tech stack, right? Particularly the younger you are, the less mature you are as an organization. But I'd argue that even the more mature ones still have this problem.
Sure, so you've got data in 5 different systems and it doesn't talk to each other.
How do I make it easier for my CSMs to have informed conversations with their customers that do not require an insane amount of prep work? Period, point blank. Not digging through Salesforce, looking at call notes that salespeople had, looking at opportunities, or even let's talk about like the field history of opportunities within Salesforce, so you can understand how it started at one price point, it ended at another, used to be one point of contact, it ended at another, like, and having to infer all of that information. Is there an easier way for them to gather all that information in 90 seconds as opposed to 15 minutes to half an hour? Deck prep.
Yeah, after you teach them exactly where to look and what to uncover and which tab to go to and all of that. Yeah.
And not only that, but it demands that everybody is doing it in the same way consistently. And I'd like for a lot of that to become like just hands off. You don't need to.
Yeah. What does that look like? A layer down. Like what do we actually
I think it's a CSP.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's a CSP. I think that's the superpower of a CSP, is its ability to collate all that information, standardize it, and make it uniform where it can. The really good ones, by way of what I just described, right? I think they all serve a different purpose for different people. The really good ones, by what I just described, would also help you create decks, right? So they have the ability to put dynamic and responsive information into decks for you, if you even use a deck. Or they have the note-taking function that puts the dynamic information in it, so you know exactly what they've invoiced in the past 90 days. You're not digging through your emails with your filter tags on them and writing down in your notebook that, Google paid us 10 grand this month, 12 grand the month before, and 18 the month before that. Oh, fuck, they're almost at 50% at their invoices in the past. Why did they go down that much? Like, I shouldn't have to look through my emails to figure that out. There should be a system that just says, hey, are you paying attention to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like where you're going with regards to actually then taking that data, so where the CSP doesn't just become a collation machine, but like then actually spits out assets and things that are not only value to you as a CSM, but valuable to the business too. Like, I think any good CSP, if designed well, should be able to create value within the organization by giving you that overview of the organization. I saw Tatango, I think, recently launched an interesting thing that I need to look into more, but it's basically a video QBR type situation where it does that kind of collation in a short little video snippet that you could send out to your low touch customers, which I think is interesting. I have trust issues with stuff like that, though.
I do too. So yeah, my first comment would be, can you edit the information and then regenerate that video?
Right? And do you trust your data enough to just feed it and send it, right? The answer to that is going to be no, because nobody really trusts their customer data.
Well, but I think you got to get to that point, because otherwise you can't scale anything if you don't. I mean, you can't. It's not even a matter of scaling, right? Then how do you even have a confident conversation with your customer if the number you're looking at on your screen you don't believe is real? We've got to get to a point where that's not it.
If you have the ability to create the deck, but then you don't have the data to know who to send the deck to, slightly problematic.
Wait, you don't even know who your point of contact is?
Yeah, right?
I think we're talking about two different things, Alex.
It's just data, right? Drop downs, rich text fields, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to summarize it, it's providing the information for my CSMs to do what I pay the big bucks for, which is to make decisions or to have conversations. I don't pay. I mean, first of all, you could pay somebody offshore to gather your data and build you a spreadsheet. Like, that's not what you pay a 6-figure CSM to do. And if you are, you're never going to get the highest and best value from them, because they could be managing more customers if all they had to do was have high value strategic conversations and relationship building exercises. Not
pull data sets together.
Yeah.
Not to write pivot tables. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect and wonderful example of digital CS and operations in general. I think digital CS and operations kind of really go hand in hand. Because at the end of the day, without the customer data and without some integrity around the data and the upkeep of the data, like are you actively working through like data validation and really just rigor around data upkeep? Like what does that look like in your world?
So we're really early in this stage, if we're being honest. So I haven't been in my role for a terribly long time. And I don't know if you've heard what's going on in the mortgage industry, but there's not a whole lot of cash flying around right now. So the only thing we can do, like, to answer your question, is
higher interest rates are great, right?
If anybody actually buys into them, yes, they're great for banks. That first part is the problem.
Exactly.
Because there's an insane amount of people with interest rates below 3%. So there's no motivation whatsoever. Anyway, the only thing we can do right now is strengthen our a policy and procedure or our consistency muscle, and making sure that we are collecting the data in the most responsible way possible, maintaining our data in the most responsible way possible. We are not yet at the point where we can invest a ton in somebody, a firm or a piece of technology collating that information for us. What we'll do in the meantime is probably create some modicum of automation within Salesforce, or Salesforce's like sister marketing software pieces, things like that. But for now, right now, I think actually now is the perfect time in our industry, fintech for me, to make sure that we're minding our P's and Q's as it relates to having clean data.
Because everything's cyclical. Yeah, everything's cyclical.
Sure, and when it comes around, you don't want to build a system, pump a bunch of data into it, and then say, okay, I want you to send emails to everybody who matches this data set, and all your data's fucking wrong.
Exactly.
And you've lost 90 days, 120 days, half a year.
Yeah.
You're behind the eight ball at that point and not taking advantage of a boom time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the word. I mean, it's, you got to capitalize on those slow periods. It's very tempting, right? Even though, I mean, there's a lot of pressure involved with kind of being slower and whatnot, I mean, there's revenue expectations and all that kind of stuff as well, but it also can be tempting to not capitalize on those times to help you future proof. So it's good knowledge drop there. I want to tie things back to the podcast a little bit, because I know that one of the reasons why I started these conversations is because I was having these conversations, with peers and with people, and it felt like a shame not to record them and put them out there. Little did I know what all was involved in that, but really the impetus was, hey, look, I want to have these conversations because I want to learn from my peers, see what people are doing that's working, see what people are doing that's not working, and also on the functional, not just the leader level, but the functional. Anyway, you get my point. Reason I started it was, hey, look, I'm learning. You might as well learn too, and I'm curious. Over the 6-ish months or so of lifetime value, you've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people. Has your purview and your kind of high level view of CS morphed in that time with those conversations that you've had? Because I know it has for me a little bit.
It's interesting because I happen to go down this path or start this journey at a really interesting time within customer success. So like we've had some pretty significant changes in the economy since, let's say, a year ago from when we're recording, which is early August.
Sure.
And I started the podcast in October, so 3 months later. And from when that started in 2022. And so I might not try to pin this all on the podcast, right? Because I started having a lot of conversations, but at the same time, everybody in CS was like, well, customer success should really have a larger part in revenue, which I never disagreed with. But here's what I'll say. Here's what I think has changed for me. I have become way more militant about the idea that every single customer success organization is different. And I think you probably heard it in my explanation of digital CS, right? It's probably slightly different than what most folks say. I pulled it apart, teased it apart a little bit. It's probably just the way I think, but I think it's also disingenuous for thought leaders to deliver their opinions in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think I think to an extent they have to, right? Because it's the only way you can get a thought out there. A lot of how I talk is I hedge a shit ton on everything I say. And that's because I don't want to be the person who says, hey, you should do X, Y, and Z every single time. There's no reason. That's the law. That is the CS law. And they're like, well, I'm actually B2C and not B2B. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I didn't even think about that.
Never mind.
That changes everything. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so customer success is so cool. And I've talked about this a couple of times on the podcast because it gives you an opportunity to see so much of how a business operates, your own as well as other, like your customers. But it is so different in so many ways that you've got to take the large overarching ideas about customer success, what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to do, and you have to bump that up against what your company is trying to accomplish and for what customer base. And I started my podcast thinking, I just want to talk to people, man. I just want to, and what I found more and more often, both on the podcast and then getting into the community of thought leadership, and I'm not a thought leader, but just like seeing a lot more of it, I became more militant and almost like protective of the audience, of stop spouting bullshit.
Yeah.
Make sure your audience understands that what you're about to say only applies to your previous experiences and your perspective today. And I think that's the thing I've learned, and the thing I will say over and over and over again.
It's almost like you should put a disclaimer at the top of your show. The opinions of this guest are only opinions based on.
And I do,
because one of the this is going to be the obscure reference of the day. One of my absolute favorite comedians is a guy called Stephen Wright. He's the king of one-liners. I don't know if you know him or not.
No.
Really dry delivery. It's like short little one-liners. One of my absolute favorite jokes of his, which is so stupid. Okay. An example of one of his jokes was he says, I used to work at a company that makes fire hydrants. And then he goes, you couldn't park anywhere near the place. But, right? It's that kind of stuff. But for what you were just talking about reminded me of another one of his jokes, which is, I once bought some used paint. Punchline is, it came in the shape of a house. So the reason why I thought about that is because you take this shape of something that you've built around customer success that worked great in one place, and it's in the shape of a house. And it's unrealistic for you to take that same shape of the house and plunk it down on a completely different set of scenarios and expect that it'll work. Now, it's still paint. It still has color to it. That doesn't change. That's your framework. But how you actually implement it and what walls you paint with that is totally different.
And the one thing I would add to that is the stakes are so high, especially right now, that if we're out there teaching aspiring CSMs or CS leaders with these immutable laws, we're setting them up for failure. When I think our responsibility as people who are out here broadcasting opinions, either of our own or of other people, is to be very, very clear that you cannot turn off your critical thinking muscle. This is a weird analogy. But
sure,
you have to take everything that is said within the context of that person's experience.
Yeah, I think that's super critical. And you're right. It is a massive responsibility. As it pertains to digital, it's like, it's unfair for me to go, digital, I can't come on here and say, hey, digital CS is just sending emails to the right person, because then somebody's going to think, I'm just going to send emails and that'll be digital CS. And that's not what it is at all.
But Alex, I think if I'm going to be a contrarian, I think if
Mm-hmm.
somebody doesn't have a digital CS motion today, and that's the first thing they
Mm-hmm.
stood up, that's a huge success.
Massive success.
Like,
Absolutely.
because you're going from 0 to 100 for
That's
like
right.
and if they get one sale off of that, one retention, one upsell, like they're going to think Alex he's a wizard, man. He helped me. So like, I think it's just maintaining that perspective, and you got to put all the pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's super important to stress that to folks.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to start wrapping things up a little bit, but I want to know before we leave each other's virtual presence today, what does Dillon Young's content diet consist of? What are you paying attention to? What other
Are you ready
podcasts
for
are you
this?
listening to?
Are
I'm
you ready
ready.
for
Let's
this?
go. Hit me up.
I don't listen to anything.
Yeah, I love it.
So
I love it. Be your
what I
own
find,
self.
no, not even. I mean, I do, and I love
Yeah.
it. No, I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I so for anybody else who has listened to my podcast, and I don't know if you've talked about this, I've listened to a couple of episodes and it hasn't come up. I'm big on mental health, and that's largely
Mm-hmm.
because I have a lot of work to do on my own, and I'm not in a bad place or anything like that, but it's something I absolutely have
Sure.
to pay attention to, and I find
Yeah.
that a lot of noise, not audible noise, but information noise for me makes it very difficult for me to live my life. And so I have to be very, very purposeful about what I listen to, what I read, what I consume. I spend time every single day reading, but it's typically the New York Times morning newsletter, and then
Mm.
the New York Times sport outlet, which is The Athletic. I read their daily newsletter. I do have,
Mm-hmm.
let's see, see if I can pull them all out here. I have the Customer Success book.
The classics.
I have Chief Customer Officer Playbook. I have the 7 Pillars of Customer Success. And when I'm on my game, I'm reading 20, 30 pages of that each morning, taking notes,
Mm-hmm.
putting stuff in my like to-do list of like stuff I want to do professionally with what I've learned. But I don't seek out a ton of podcasts, because the other thing I've learned is my wife and I have this fight all the time. We were going on vacation, and it was like 3 weeks away, and it was with a bunch of our friends. And the way we do it is we have to do everybody does a night for dinner.
Yeah.
And our night was pizza. And 3 weeks before we went on vacation, she started sending me links to pizza places. Now, we don't fight about this anymore, because what I've learned is she's going to do that. And what I'm going to do is fucking ignore it. And then 20 minutes before my task is due, I'll do my research. I'll find a pizza place. I'll order that pizza, and it'll be good enough. And what I mean by that is to say, I don't consume a ton of information for no damn reason. It's another
Mm-hmm.
part of the noise theory. Is I
Mm-hmm.
typically am only consuming information when I need to, when I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to accomplish a task. It's another thing I know about myself is I go nuts trying to learn something. Like like nothing else can get in the way. I can't
Yeah.
watch TV. I can't sometimes have a conversation, because I just have to solve this problem. So I have to actively, often, avoid information that makes me think there's a problem I have to solve.
Yeah. I, I can sympathize with that so much, and I love the focus on mental health and just awareness around what your own needs are. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so important, because we get just stuff flung our way constantly,
Mm-hmm.
24 hours a day, and one of my pet peeves is like um, being subjected to like noise without you being able to give that noise permission to enter. You know what I mean? Like whether it's physical noise, like, like your neighbor blasting stuff real loud in the backyard. I'm sorry, I don't really want to hear that at the moment, and so it makes me mad when I don't have control over that. So I love that you're controlling your content diet that way, because you're right,
That's just
it's
about
important
the
what you let
most.
in and what you know.
That's just about the most type A thing you could ever say. Is you can't control your senses. I wish I could just turn my
So
ears
true.
off, man.
It's so true. Like, do you really need a really loud USB speaker at the public pool? I'm sorry, you don't. You don't.
But that's you, man. That's
That's
just like
me.
your opinion.
That's just like your opinion, man. Who do you want to perhaps give a shout out to, some kudos to, that's doing cool stuff in digital CS? I know you're not paying attention to anyone, but you've probably come across, you had some good conversations, you've come across some folks that are doing cool things digitally.
I'll tell you. So you're absolutely right. So since I put the podcast on hiatus, I've kind of been on a complete like LinkedIn hiatus. Like I get on there because I don't want to log back in September and have 6,000 new notifications, but I'm not totally following a ton of what anybody's doing. So these are kind of like old mainstays. So this is my opportunity to apologize to Mickey Powell, in that I think that dude is insanely intelligent, and if I describe myself as somebody who gets obsessed with something, that's what I believe Mickey to be the same way. Like he's all in on the AI stuff, which I think is ultimately very scalable.
Mickey's a poster child for what we were talking about earlier too, which is to say, he doesn't have a college degree. He's self-educated. He goes deep on topics, learns a ton about those topics, and in that becomes an expert, and so intelligent. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, and what's so bizarre about Mickey is he didn't want to go to college, which whatever. Like I'm not judging that. What I'm judging is he somehow made a promise he was mature enough to make that decision, and in the same mental breath, was like, all right, 18-year-old Mickey, if you're not going to go to college, then you need to want to learn every day. And when he said that on my podcast, and I've heard him say it on other ones, I was like, okay, dude, like, way to make us all look like absolute like Neanderthals, that you had the presence of mind at that time to say, like, I'm going to take every learning opportunity I get and I'm going to make the most of it. Anyway, love that dude. I can't wait to see the Warriors stink this year. The other one would be a gentleman I've had exactly one conversation with, and it was about maybe being on my podcast. It has not come to fruition yet. Mr. Dan Ennis, who I think is another absolutely brilliant mind. Any content he puts out or anything he's a part of, I know for a fact that he's very picky about the stuff that he associates himself with. That's why he told me to fuck up. No, he didn't. But he made that very clear of like, I only get involved in stuff that I believe in stuff where like my opinion is going to be stated the way I want it to be. And I found him to be a very intelligent person with a ton of integrity. And he's got a lot of things to say about digital CS.
I agree with you completely. At the time we're recording, it hasn't been released yet, but by the time this will be released, his episode will be live as well.
I'll listen to that one for sure.
So go listen to that if you're listening now. But I think he'd be great on your show as well. That's going to be good. Well, this has been cool. It's been just nice, casual, great conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Where can people find you? Probably not LinkedIn right now. You're on a hiatus.
I mean, you can go follow me. It's just not. It's going to be kind of boring. I hope I'm not your only
Lifetime Value Podcast. The link will be in the description, of course.
Go to the LTV podcast. You can also shoot me an email at Dillon, spelled Dillon, at lifetimevaluepodcast.com. And yeah, we are just getting started on the second season. It's going to be slightly different, but we're we're going to do a second season probably starting late September. So if you go and follow the page, you listen to some of the old ones. Just don't get your hopes up that the new ones are going to sound like the old ones, and then watch out for some new episodes starting in the fall.
It's going to be great. Well, like I said before, I really enjoy listening to your show. I can't wait for it to come back and maybe be part of it. I don't know.
Alex, can I give you some kudos? You have such a velvety voice. Is that weird?
Does this help?
No, actually, I liked it just the way it was. Don't change a thing.
You have a really good radio voice, and in fact, it reminds me of one of my absolute favorite YouTubers. This may not.
Mr.
This
Beast?
may not. No.
He's the only one I know.
He calls himself Mr. Regular. His channel is Regular Car Reviews. I don't know if you've seen it. It's hilarious.
Because they're just like plain cars.
It's totally. It's hilarious. It is vulgar, so watch
Just
out
like
for that.
me.
But your voice sounds just like that, guys. So, and it's a good voice. It's a nice radio.
I love the voice for radio. I always get this confused, right? Because people are like the voice for radio thing, and I always think it's an insult because I'm used to the phrase "you have a face for radio," and that's not what you meant, right?
It's not what I meant. No.
Thank you. I'm handsome, everybody.
Yes.
Make sure to watch
indeed.
the YouTube.
Yeah. And on that note, the handsome Dillon Young, thanks for joining. And we'll have to have you back.
Hey, this was a pleasure, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. And if you do fall apart mentally from the pressures of the podcast, you know where to find me because I've been there.
I'll take some lessons from your playbook and take a couple of months off. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps us to grow and to provide value to a broader audience. You can view the Digital Customer Success definition word map and get more details about the show at digitalcustomersuccess.com. My name is Alex Turkovich. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.